The main gate closes at dusk. You have to picture it the way it actually happened, night after night, in every walled town in the ancient world. The sun drops behind the hills. The last carts rattle in over the threshold. And then, with a sound you could hear from 3 streets away, the great doors swing shut, and the heavy bar drops into place. A city that left its main gate open after dark was a city asking to be robbed, or worse. So the gate closes. And whoever is still outside is still outside. Now picture a man on the road who arrives 1 hour too late. He can see the town ahead of him in the last of the light. He can smell the cooking fires. Behind him is a donkey, and on the donkey's back is everything he owns for this trip, roped down and piled high. He walks up to the great gate and puts his hand on it, and it does not move. It is barred for the night. But there is something else. Beside the great gate, built low into the wall, there is a second opening, a small one, narrow enough that only one person can pass through it at a time, and only on foot, and only stooping. It is the way in for travelers who come after dark. It is the one door still open to him. And here is the thing about that little door. To get through it, the man cannot bring the donkey. He cannot bring the cart. He cannot bring the whole load roped down on the animal's back. He has to decide, standing there in the dark, what actually comes through the wall with him and what gets left on the ground outside until morning. Hold on to that picture. The barred gate, the small door, the man deciding what he can carry. We are going to come back to it, and when we do, it is going to open up into the most honest thing anyone has ever said about following God. But not yet, because first we have to talk about the fear. There is a sentence Jesus said that has frightened people for 2,000 years. He said it near the end of the most famous sermon in history, and he said it again on a dusty road on his way to die, and both times the words land like a door swinging half shut. Small is the gate, he said, and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Only a few. You can feel what that does to a person. Somewhere in the crowd, then and now, is someone doing the math. If the road is narrow, and only a few find it, then what are my odds? Is grace a wide open field, or is it a small room, with a short guest list, and I did not make the cut? For 2,000 years, people have heard the word narrow, and felt a cold hand close around the chest. They have pictured heaven as a turnstile, and themselves as one of the many who do not fit. Here's what most people miss. The fear comes from a single word, and the word has been doing something in our heads that it was never doing in the mouth of the man who first said it. When Jesus said narrow, he was not talking about how many people fit through the door. He was not measuring the size of the crowd at all. He was talking about something else entirely, something the original languages carry, that English quietly drops on the floor. And once you see it, this teaching stops sounding like a rope stretched across an entrance to keep you out. It starts sounding like a hand reaching through the dark to pull you in. So let me say what this is and what it is not. This is not a story about a head count. This is not a story about who is on the list and who got left off. This is not a story about a God standing at a narrow door, arms folded, turning most of us away. This is a story about one word we have been hearing wrong for a very long time, and about a small door in the dark, and about the man who is willing to lay himself down in the opening so that you can get through. Stay with me, because to understand what Jesus meant, you have to go back to the 2 moments he actually said it. And they could not be more different. The first time, he is on a road. Jesus is walking toward Jerusalem. He knows what is waiting there, and somewhere in the crowd around him, a man works up the nerve to ask the question everyone is thinking and nobody wants to say out loud. Lord, he asks, are only a few people going to be saved? Listen to the fear under that question. He is not asking for a definition. He is not curious about theology. He is asking about the size of the group because he wants to know if he is going to be in it. Is the door big enough for everyone? Or is it a small opening, and most of us are going to be standing outside it in the dark? It is the same fear you feel when you walk into a room and wonder if there is a place for you. He wanted a number. He wanted Jesus to say, "Don't worry, it's most people," or at least, "Here's the percentage." And Jesus refused to give him one. Watch what he does instead. because it tells you everything about what kind of teacher he is. The man asked, "How many?" And Jesus answered, "Strive to enter through the narrow door." He took a question about statistics and turned it into a command about the one person asking. He is saying, in effect, stop counting the crowd. Stop doing the math on everyone else. The only door you need to worry about is the one in front of you. Are you walking through it? That move is the whole heart of this teaching. Jesus is not interested in handing out a population estimate of heaven. He never once, in any of the Gospels, tells us the number. He is interested in the road under your feet right now. Not the size of the group, the direction of your steps. The second time he says it, the setting is completely different, and the difference matters. Picture a hillside above the Sea of Galilee. A crowd is sitting on the grass, ordinary people, fishermen with salt still in their beards, farmers, mothers with children asleep against them, and a few religious officials standing at the edges, with their arms crossed, sizing up this new teacher. Jesus has been speaking for a long time. This is the Sermon on the Mount, and he has spent it raising the bar past anything the experts of his day taught. He has talked about anger and lust and money and worry. He has told them that righteousness is not the polished performance everyone can see. It is the condition of the heart no one can. And then, near the very end, he gives them the fork in the road. Enter through the narrow gate, he says. For wide is the gate, and broad is the road, that leads to destruction, and many go in that way. But small is the gate, and narrow the road, that leads to life, and only a few find it. Now notice where that sits. It is not his opening line. It is not the friendly welcome at the front of the sermon. It is the closing challenge. Everything he has just taught, the turning of the cheek, the loving of enemies, the giving that no one sees, all of it funnels down to this one fork. 2 gates, 2 roads. Choose. The sermon does not end with a soft landing. It ends with a decision you cannot get out of, because not choosing is itself a choice for the wide road. You are on one of these 2 roads right now, whether you ever meant to pick one or not. So we have 2 scenes. A man on a road, afraid he is not in the group. A crowd on a hill, being handed a choice. And in both of them, the same word. Narrow. Here is where we finally open the word up. In the language Jesus was quoted in, the word we hear as narrow is the Greek word stenos. And stenos does mean narrow, that part is fine. But it is a very particular kind of narrow. It is not the narrow of a short guest list. It is the narrow you feel in your body, when a hallway tightens around your shoulders, when a canyon closes in on both sides, when the walls press, so close there is no room to drift. It is confined, constricted, pressed in. It is the same word, centuries later, that would give doctors a term for a dangerous narrowing in the body, a passage tightening, until there is barely room to move through it. That is the flavor of the word, not a short list, a tight squeeze. Do you feel the difference already? A short guest list is about how many get in. A tightening canyon is about what the passage does to you while you are in it. And there is a moment in the Greek Old Testament that shows you exactly what this word does to a person. Go back to a strange old story in the book of Numbers. A man named Balaam is riding his donkey down a path, hired to go and curse the people of God, and he cannot see the angel standing in the road in front of him. His donkey can. The animal keeps stopping, keeps swerving, and Balaam keeps beating it to move on. And then they come to a place where the path runs between 2 walls, and the text says the angel stood in a narrow place, where there was no way to turn to the right hand or to the left. That is the word, stenos, a narrow place. Sit with that picture for a second, because it is doing something quiet and important. A narrow place is not just a small place. It is a place with no room to wander. Balaam cannot drift to the left. He cannot ease off to the right. The walls hold him to one line. And here is what most people miss about that story. In the story, the narrowing of the path becomes the very place where Balaam's eyes are finally opened. He had been blind to the angel the whole way down the road. It is in the tight place, the place with no room left to swerve, that he finally sees. You can draw your own conclusion from that. But it is hard to read it and not notice that the constriction was not the end of him. It was the thing that made him look up. But it gets stranger. Because the narrow place in that story is not only physical. Balaam is a man boxed in by his own greed, hemmed in by a job he should never have taken, pressed on every side by a god he keeps trying to get around. The walls of the canyon are just the outside of something that is already true on the inside. He is in a tight spot in every sense of the phrase. And that double meaning, the tight place, that is also the hard place, is not an accident of the story. It is built into the very language underneath it. That is what we have to look at next. Before we go into that language, one quick thing. If this kind of Bible deep dive helps you see Scripture with new eyes, subscribe and stay with us. And keep that comment box in mind. I am going to ask you a question at the end, and I want your answer. Even one word. Now, back to that little word narrow, because the Hebrew underneath it is about to make everything we have said so far look like the shallow end. The Greek word stenos was chosen carefully, but the Greek was translating something older, and the older word is where this gets personal. Now, Matthew wrote his gospel in Greek, so the word on the page is a Greek word, but the picture behind it is older than Greek. Jesus and everyone listening to him lived inside the Hebrew scriptures, and in that older world, the idea of a narrow place carried a weight that the Greek only hints at. Take one Hebrew root the scholars write as tsar. It is not the word Matthew used, but it is the world Matthew's word grew up in. And tsar is doing two jobs at once, two jobs that English keeps in separate rooms and never lets talk to each other. On the one hand, tsar means narrow, tight, constricted, hemmed in, the physical fact of a small space with walls too close. But the very same word, the exact same word, also means distress, trouble, affliction, anguish. The root behind it, tsar, means to bind, to besiege, to press from every side at once. Do you see what that fuses together? In Hebrew, the word for a tight physical space and the word for the feeling of being crushed by life are the same word. To be in a narrow place is to be in distress. To be squeezed by trouble is to be in a tight spot, and the tight spot is the trouble. There is no daylight between them. Think about how David talks in the Psalms. Over and over he cries out that he is in trouble, that his enemies are closing in, that there is no way out. And the picture living inside the Hebrew is not an abstract feeling. It is a man backed into a canyon. Walls closing on both sides. No room to turn to the right or the left. The enemy in front of him and the rock behind him. The Hebrew imagination never separated the emotion of being trapped from the geography of a tight place. They were the same experience. So they became the same word, which means that long before Jesus ever opened his mouth in Greek, the language he was raised in already knew something we forgot. Narrow and hard were never two different ideas. They were one. The narrow place is the hard place. The tight road is the troubled road. It is baked into the vocabulary at the root. And this is where it gets remarkable, because Jesus does not just use the ordinary word for narrow when he describes the road. He reaches for a different word entirely, and it is even stronger. Look again at what he said. Narrow the road that leads to life. We have talked about the gate, but the word for the road is a separate word, and it is not even really an adjective. It is a verb wearing a disguise. In Greek, it is a form of the verb phlibo, and phlibo means to press. To crush, to squeeze, the way you would press grapes in a wine press to force the juice out of them. It carries the sense of being compressed, hemmed in, put under weight. The same family of words shows up all over the New Testament translated as trouble, affliction, tribulation. When the Apostle Paul writes that we are hard-pressed on every side, this is the word he reaches for. Hard-pressed, squeezed. So the sense underneath, that word is not simply a narrow road. It is a road that carries the idea of pressure, of being pressed in, hemmed in, put under weight. If you wanted to feel what the word is reaching for, you would not picture a thin path. You would picture a squeeze. And here is a detail worth stopping on. There were plainer, gentler words for narrow available, words that just mean thin, or small, or tight. But the word chosen for this road is one soaked in the language of pressure and hardship, the same family the New Testament reaches for when it talks about affliction and trouble and being hard-pressed. Of all the ways to describe the road to life, this is the shade of meaning that got picked. That tells you something about the road. Stay with me, because this changes the whole feel of the saying. The road to life is not narrow the way a turnstile is narrow, where the only problem is squeezing your body through a gap. It is narrow the way a mountain pass is narrow, where the walls press in and the climbing is hard, and you come out the other side having left some things behind on the ground. The difficulty is not a flaw in the design. The difficulty is the description. He is not warning you that the door is small. He is telling you that the road presses. Now hold that against the other road, because Jesus gives it its own word too. The wide road, the road to destruction, is called Eurokoros, and it means roomy, spacious, wide open, with plenty of room to spread out. Room for the cart, room for the cargo, room for the whole caravan, and every version of yourself you never wanted to give up. And that is exactly the problem with it. A road with infinite room to drift is a road that asks nothing of you, corrects nothing in you, and leaves you to wander wherever the slope of your own wanting happens to pull. The wide road feels like freedom. It is really just the absence of anything holding you to a direction. The broad way demands nothing from you, so it makes nothing of you. Here's the part nobody tells you. Somewhere along the way, well-meaning people muddied this passage, and it is worth clearing off the table before we go on. You may have heard a sermon about a special gate in the wall of Jerusalem, a small door cut into the big city gate, and preachers will tell you it was called the eye of the needle, and that a camel could only squeeze through it on its knees, with all its baggage stripped off. It is a lovely image. It preaches beautifully. It is also not real. There is no archaeology for such a gate. No ancient writer mentions it. No historical record of it exists anywhere. The whole story appears to be a much later invention, passed from one preacher to the next over centuries, because it makes a hard saying more comfortable to hold. And I bring it up for a reason bigger than this one legend. This is how bad Bible teaching gets started. Somebody invents a colorful detail that makes a verse easier to swallow. It preaches well, people repeat it, and 300 years later it is being taught as fact. The cure is simple. Stay with what the text actually says, in the language it actually used. Because the real thing is always stronger than the thing we invent to soften it. We do not need a fake gate to make Jesus profound. The Greek already did the work. And once you strip the legend away, you can see what Jesus was really doing, which was not inventing a brand new idea at all. He was stepping into a river that had been running through his people's scriptures for over 1,000 years. There is an ancient pattern in the Bible that scholars call the two ways. And the idea is dead simple. Life is a fork in the road, and you are always, right now, standing at it. You hear it most clearly in the last words of Moses. Picture the scene. An entire nation is camped on the plains of Moab, at the very edge of the land they wandered 40 years to reach. Moses is old. He knows he is not going to cross over with them. And in the last great speech of his life, he lays their whole future in front of them, as a choice between two roads. I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing, he says. Therefore choose life, that you and your children may live. Two ways. One leads to life. One leads away from it. And the choosing is theirs. He even calls heaven and earth to stand as witnesses, as if to say, this is the most serious thing I will ever put in front of you. You hear it again in the very first of the Psalms, which opens the whole songbook of Israel by drawing the same fork. There is the way of the righteous, a person planted like a tree beside streams of water, roots deep, leaves green, fruit coming in its season. And there is the way of the wicked, who are not a tree at all, but chaff. The dry, weightless husk left over after the grain is beaten out, so light the wind just carries it off. One has roots, the other cannot even stay in place. And the psalm ends by saying the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked comes to nothing. You hear it in the Proverbs, which return to it constantly. There is a way that seems right to a man, they warn, but its end is the way of death. And that little phrase, seems right, is the whole danger of the wide road. It never announces itself as the road to ruin. It feels reasonable. It feels like what everyone else is doing. That is exactly why it is wide. And by the time Jesus was standing on that hill, this teaching had sunk so deep into Jewish thought that it turns up everywhere. It is there in the writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls community, who framed the whole of life as a walk between two spirits, two ways. It is there in the Didache, one of the very earliest Christian instruction manuals we have, which opens with almost the same words Moses used. There are two ways, one of life and one of death, and a great difference between the two. So when Jesus stands on the mountain and says, "Here are two gates, here are two roads, choose," his listeners were not hearing something strange and new. They were hearing the oldest invitation in their whole Bible, the one Moses gave at the edge of the Promised Land, the one the first Psalm sang, the one their grandparents had taught them at the table. Choose life. And that reframes the narrow gate completely. Because it was never a threat designed to scare you about your odds. It is the same thing God has been saying to people he loves since the edge of the Promised Land. Two roads are in front of you. One is wide and asks nothing and ends in ruin. One is tight and costs you something and leads home. He is not slamming a door in your face. He is begging you, with everything in him, to take the road that actually goes somewhere good. But that leaves a hard question sitting on the table. If the good road is the pressed one, the road underweight, the road that costs you something, then why? Why would the way to life be the way that hurts? Why would a good God route the people he loves through the tight place instead of the open field? Here is at least part of the answer. The things most worth becoming are never handed to you. They are formed in you. And formation presses. Think honestly about your own life for a second. Nobody drifts into patience. Nobody accidentally becomes honest. No one wakes up one morning gentle or faithful to one person across 40 years or able to forgive someone who never once said sorry. Those things do not happen to you on the wide road, in the open field, with room to spread out and carry everything. They are pressed into a person the way a blade is pressed into shape with heat and force and repetition against resistance over time. The wide road produces nothing in you because it demands nothing from you. The narrow road produces something precisely because it costs something. The pressure is not the enemy of the life Jesus is offering you. The pressure is how that life gets made. Let me put that where you can feel it. You have moved house at least once. And if you have, you know the moment. You are standing in a doorway with a box in your arms or a piece of furniture, something you have owned for years, something you assumed was coming with you. And you look at the door and you look at the thing in your hands and you realize, standing right there, that it is not going to fit. It is not coming through. And you have to make a decision you did not want to make in a doorway in a hurry. What actually comes with me into the next place? And what do I set down and leave behind? Everybody has set something down in a doorway and known it was not coming. That feeling, that exact feeling, is what the narrow gate is about. Because now we can go back to where we started. Back to the man on the road, arriving at the town, after dark, standing in front of the barred gate, with his donkey loaded down behind him. Remember the small door built into the wall, the low one, the one still open to travelers who came too late. Look at what that door required of him. To get through it, he had to come on foot. He had to leave the donkey outside, or unload it, and carry through only what he could fit in his own two hands, bent low, one man at a time. He could not bring the whole caravan through that opening. The gate itself decided how much of what he had piled on, that animal's back actually came into the city with him. He came through narrow, and he came through light. That is the picture under the words. Not a trick gate. Not a camel forced to its knees. Just the plain, ancient truth that a narrow way will not let you carry everything you wanted to bring. The wide road lets you bring all of it. Your baggage, your grudges, your double life, the resentment you have rehearsed so many times it feels like part of you now. The version of yourself you are most comfortable with and least willing to surrender. The wide road has room for every bit of it, because the wide road is going nowhere and does not care what you drag along. But the narrow gate presses you precisely because it will not let you keep everything. That is what makes it hard. And listen, that is also what makes it good. The squeeze of the narrow road is not God being difficult for the sake of it. It is the pressing that leaves the extra weight on the ground where it belonged all along. And most of the time, the thing the walls press out of you is the very thing that was crushing you to begin with. Now watch what happens next, because this is where the whole teaching turns from a warning into the best news you have ever heard. The question was still hanging there, wasn't it? If the road is that hard, that pressed, that costly, then who could ever make it through? If getting in depends on me straining every nerve, agonizing my way down a crushed road under my own strength, then the frightened man on the road to Jerusalem was right to be afraid. And so are you. But Jesus does not leave the gate as a thing. He makes it a person. Later, in John's Gospel, he says it as plainly as it can be said. I am the gate, he says. Whoever enters through me will be saved. And then, even more directly, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. There it is. There is the reason the gate is narrow. The gate is narrow because it is one, not because grace is running low, not because the room is nearly full. Because there is one door, and the door has a name, and the name is Jesus. 2 plus 2 has one right answer, and that is not stinginess. That is just what truth is. There is one bridge across the canyon, and walking onto it is not exclusion. It is rescue, and there is something almost unbearably tender hiding in that image, if you know how shepherds actually worked. Out in the wilderness of Judea, a shepherd would build a rough pen of stacked stones to hold the flock at night, and he would leave one gap in the wall for a doorway. And then, when the sheep were in, the shepherd himself would lie down across that gap, his own body in the opening. Nothing could get into the sheep, and no sheep could wander out, except across him. So when Jesus says, I am the door, he is not describing a barrier built to keep you out. He is describing a shepherd who has laid his own body down in the one opening, so that the only way through to safety runs straight across him. The narrow gate, it turns out, is the shape of a person lying down in the gap, and that is where the last Greek word finally makes sense. Back in Luke, Jesus did not say, enter the narrow door. He said, strive to enter, and the word for strive is agonizomai. You can hear the English word hiding inside it. Agonize. It was the word for an athlete straining in a contest, a wrestler throwing everything he had against his opponent, a runner emptying his whole body toward the line. And it is the same root as the word Luke uses for what happened to Jesus later, in a garden called Gethsemane, on the night before he died, where he prayed in agony until he could barely stand. The striving he asks of you, and the struggle he himself walked through, come from the same family of words. But here is the difference, and it is everything. He went through the real pressure first. The garden, the nails, the crushed road that no one else could survive. He walked the narrow way all the way to the end, and he opened the door from the other side. So the gate you could never force your way through stands open because he is standing in it. You do not strain your way to God by sheer willpower, white-knuckling a road too hard for any human being to finish. That was never the deal. The striving Jesus asks for is not the striving of someone trying to earn the door. It is the striving of someone who has already found the one door and refuses to be turned away from it. Someone who keeps walking through the pressure because they have seen who is standing on the other side, holding it open. And do you remember the frightened man's question, the one that started all of this? How many? Just a few? Watch how Jesus answers it, just a few verses later in that same conversation. People will come, he says, from east and west, from north and south, and take their places at the feast in the kingdom of God. From every direction on the map, crowds streaming in from every corner of the earth to sit down at a table. The door is narrow, but the invitation is thrown to the whole world. That is the paradox the original languages were protecting the whole time. One door, everyone on earth invited through it. The gate is single, but the welcome behind it is wide open. So hear this clearly. Narrow does not mean grace runs short. Narrow does not mean the list is short, and your name is probably not on it. Narrow does not mean the door is too small for someone like you. It means the road holds you to one line, and it presses the extra weight off you as you go, and the one line leads home. That is all it ever meant. So what do you do with this on an ordinary Tuesday when your own life already feels like a narrow place? Start by letting the word do its honest work on you. If you are following God, and it feels hard right now, pressed, costly, like a canyon, with no room to move, then hear what the Greek has been saying this whole time. You may be exactly where you were supposed to be. The hardness is not proof you made a wrong turn somewhere. The good road was never the smooth one. It was always the pressed one. We have this quiet assumption that if something is really from God, it should feel easy, and that friction means we have failed. And the vocabulary of this one saying takes that assumption apart. Difficulty on the right road is not the same thing as evidence you are on the wrong one. Sometimes the squeeze is the surest sign you are still on the path and not off it. And if you are tired, bone-tired, and you cannot figure out why, here is a thing worth checking. Some of us are not exhausted because the road is too hard. We are exhausted because we are dragging a loaded caravan down a footpath. The resentment we will not set down. The double life we are working so hard to keep. The old image of ourselves we refuse to surrender. The grievance we have rehearsed so many times it feels like a limb now. The gate is not asking you to get stronger so you can haul all of it through. It is asking you to set it down so you can fit. And what the walls press out of you was almost always the thing that was crushing you anyway. But hear the last thing, because it is the only thing that finally matters. You do not have to be strong enough for this door. That was never what it was measuring. The gate that looks too narrow for someone like you to ever fit through turns out, when you get close, not to be a gap in a wall at all. It is a person, arms open, lying down in the one opening, so the way to safety runs across his own body. Calling, from every direction on the map, to everyone who was ever afraid the door was too small for them. Come, there is room at the table. There is room for you. Come. So let me ask you the question I promised at the start, and I want your answer in the comments. What is the one thing you have been trying to carry through that gate, the thing you already know is not going to fit? You do not have to explain it. One word is enough. Just name it and set it down. If this changed the way you hear the narrow gate, subscribe and stay with us as we keep digging into these texts one word at a time. Share it with someone who has spent their whole life afraid the door was too small for them. And if you would, pray for us as we keep doing this work. And may the one who is himself the door walk with you through every narrow place you ever have to cross.